Welcome back to another growth cycle video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to grow your own sprouts, to look after them, make sure they don't go moldy, make sure they're safe, tasty, you get a really high germination rate, but also to grow sprouts from, you don't need to buy a sprouting kit or anything, just from leftover materials you have sitting around in the home. And then I'm going to talk briefly about the benefits nutritionally and taste-wise, and how you can store them, and just basically how to get the most out of your sprouting. Before you begin sprouting, you need to collect your materials. What you'll need, first and foremost, you'll need seed. So this is radish seed. I love radish sprouts. They are peppery, slightly just a little bit bitter, but beautiful, so fresh, really wonderful garnish. The other sprouts I've done in this method are alfalfa sprouts. I've done mung bean sprouts, very easy. Mung beans are very cheap. You can buy them from any Asian supermarket, much cheaper than you can buy a seed kit like this. So yeah, that's another big tip for you. So you need your seed, you'll need a plastic container, something that if you want to store it in the fridge. So that's my suggestion. Obviously you want to do something recycled. Just any old glass jar, some Chuck's cloth. I've cut it into a size that's large enough to totally cover the top of the jar, with a little bit of excess the whole way around. And something, you could either use a rubber band, you could use a hair tie for those girls out there. This is kind of like a hair tie that I got, that I had available. And so I've shown you all of the materials you need, but before we begin sprouting, it's really important that you make sure your jar and your cloth and everything is sanitized totally, so there's no leftover residual bacteria or any mold or anything from the last sprouting you've done. You can reuse these over and over again. I'm going to show you a tip that is the easiest way to sanitize a glass jar. Shouldn't be, because the science has shown that this is an extremely effective way to sanitize instruments and glass and things, as long as it's not got any metal in it. So you want to make sure you've not got your metal jar lid. But if you've got a microwave at home, these are brilliant. So I just put the jar inside of the microwave, including the Chuck's cloth. Put it in for about a minute, and once you've done that, your jar will be nice and sterilized. There will not be any bacteria left over, and you're ready to go on to your the sprouting stage. You need to add a disclaimer here. Make sure you watch this when it's in the microwave, in particular the cloth. Now obviously you've just rinsed off your cloth from the last time you've used it, so it's full of moisture. You don't want to put a dry cloth in there, and of course if you smell smoke, if you see fire, just stop the microwave and pull the cloth out. You'll need to get another Chuck's cloth, but I've never had an issue with it. Here you can see, here's my cloth, nice and sterilized. My beautiful jar. It's a bit hot, so you probably don't want to grab it like that. You want to grab it with the cloth. And yeah, that's perfectly sterilized, ready for sprouting. You might want to rinse it off just to make sure that it's not hot, because obviously if it's too hot, that can denature the seed. That can mean you're not going to sprout them. So I'll just take it over to the sink and rinse it a couple of times. So I poured all the leftover seed that I had, radish seed, into the jar, and you can see it in there. It's all together in a clump. It's kind of hard to see because it's under the water, but I've already added a little bit of water just to make sure that any seeds that were sticking to the sides of the jar were together. And so what we're going to do is we are literally just going to leave it in water. Maybe I might add a little bit more water than that, and just leave it to soak overnight, 8 hours to 12 hours. Probably, actually, I've found soaking it for 24 hours can be helpful. That's because in the early stage, when the seed is dormant, it won't activate, it won't start to sprout until it's been thoroughly rinsed and soaked in water. So after about 24 hours, then we can go on to the next stage. See, I've added some water, so I've left them in this water for 8 hours, 12 hours. All you need is you get your chucks cloth, you get a hair tie or a rubber band like this, and what you want to do is, once I get the camera set up, you see this, you want to twist it like this. If it's a hair tie, you want to twist it maybe only once. Because this one's extra stretchy, or rubber band can be extra stretchy, you might want to take one of the loops, double it over again, so that you end up with about three loops together like this. So now I've got 3 loops, I can put it into my hand like this. I've got my jar with the cloth. I just put it over like that, nice and secure. You want to just twist it, check that, and make sure that the seal is continuous all the way around the lid of the jar. So now I've got my jar nice and sealed, and this is really important that you do. Like I've tried many times just using my hand to do the draining. Trust me, it's not worth it. You get seeds in the cracks of your hand. The seeds all go down the drain after 3 days of doing this, and it's just such a hassle. It's such a waste of seed. You want to make sure you have a proper seal like this. I find the trucks cloth is great because none of the seeds, doesn't matter how big how small the seed is, the mesh is fine enough that the seeds won't come through. But it's also permeable enough that the water can get through. Now, once you've done that, once it's soaked for 12 hours, you want to make sure that you thoroughly rinse it out in a sink. So I'm just going to take it over to the sink. So at least twice a day. Ideally, I'll do it once in the morning, maybe once in the afternoon, and once before I go to bed. So 3 times. You take it to your sink and you pour it out. A little bit of time for the water to pour out. Then you want to use the cold tap, and you just simply rinse the seeds like so. You want to make sure that all of the seeds are inside of the water, and then so that you can rinse off any possible bacteria or mold on the surface of your seeds. And I suggest you rinse at least twice. So I poured out the residue of water, and I've got another set of water, and I'll turn off the tap to save water. Conservation is key. And so I will pour out any of the remaining water. Now it's important that you can leave a tiny bit of water, but you want to make sure that all of your seeds are actually able to access the air, because seeds actually require oxygen. And this is a very interesting scientific principle I learned about as my time as a science teacher. The seeds, while they grow, before they have a leaf, they can't do photosynthesis. So they actually need to access the energy stored in the seed to grow. They actually have a storage of fat inside the seed, did you know? In that process, it's respiration, the exact same process that you and I do to get our energy. Now, how do we respire? We breathe. We need oxygen. Your seeds need oxygen to sprout. So, once you've soaked them, you want to, after that, every time you rinse them, you want to make sure that the seeds have at least a little bit of a side of the seed that can access the air, so that oxygen can get into the seed and it can grow. Your seeds may not be sprouting if you tried this at home, possibly because they're not able to access the oxygen. So there's a tip for you. And then another tip: once they don't need any sunshine after you've rinsed them until the first sprout comes out. Then they still don't need sunshine because the leaves will be too small. They don't really start photosynthesis. But if you want to have a nice green shoot, you might want to leave them in sun for 1 or 2 days. Radish or alfalfa or small seeds like this, about maybe half a centimeter or less in diameter, will only take 5 days, 7 days. But you can grow them to your preference. But you do that for 5 to 6 days. Remember, rinsing at least twice a day, and you'll have your sprouts. So I've got my sprouts. I've looked after them for about 5 days, watering them at least twice a day. So that is, as I showed you earlier, the full rinse method. And also, to get them nice and sprouted and a little bit green like this, I've left them out in the sun. What I found with sprouts is that they tend to clump together, and also once I release the water, they seem to stick together in particular, and they spread out and they stick to the walls. And it's really important they don't stick individually, so they don't dry out. So to completely make sure that you get all of the sprouts out of the jar, especially alfalfa, which is or other very small seeds like mustard seeds. If you want to make sure you get everything out, you just put a bit of water in the bottom, and and this is also really important because you want to make sure that you rinse your sprouts thoroughly before you eat them. So then I've got my sprouts into my container. I will go and rinse those off, drain out any of the excess liquid, and then I'll have a nice container to store in the fridge. So I've drained the container. I wanted to show you this. You can see there's still a little bit of moisture, but it's pretty dry. I wanted to show you how much I've drained it. See, there's just a little bit of water, but mostly it's all completely drained. Why? Well, because if you leave a lot of moisture in so that there's a pool of water at the bottom of your container, that is a problem. Moisture is enemy number one. If you don't want to get any kind of bacteria or mold, you want to make sure that your sprouts are as exposed to the air as possible. You also then want to make sure you put your lid on securely, and you put it immediately, well, after you got what you need to eat for the day. Put it immediately into the fridge, because once it's in the fridge, the bacteria, the growth stage, it will still remain living, by the way. The sprouts remain living, but the bacteria and mold or any other greeblies, they will become dormant in the cold conditions of the fridge. So we'll just put it straight in, right into the top there. But as I showed you earlier, I've got a little bit of the sprouts, just a nice little taster for this video. But why would you bother to sprout in the first place? Well, there's a number of reasons. Most significantly, in my opinion, we sprout these our seeds because they taste amazing. This is alfalfa sprout. Just tastes so fresh and wonderful. It's just like fresh bean sprouts, but a little bit more like fresher. Like it's still living, so you can taste the greenness. You can taste. It's like the difference between really fresh baby spinach and maybe an old iceberg lettuce. You know, there's flavor. It's beautiful. These are so tasty. A wonderful garnish to any rice dish. You could even put it as a garnish on a salad or a meat dish. Just beautiful. Or eat it by itself. That's the way I like to do it, actually. But so they taste wonderful. But in addition, sprouts are nutritional powerhouses. Now, there's a number of journal publications which indicate that after 3 to 5 days, the protein and macronutrient composition in sprouts increases significantly, up to 30% higher accessible amino acid content, and even things like phosphorus, magnesium, manganese, vitamin C and K, they all increase during the sprouting process. Now, I'm not entirely sure how that happens or why that happens. I do believe that the vitamin content will increase due to the increase in chlorophyll and the growth process. I know that the amino acids become more accessible, easier to digest, because as the seed accesses its own stores and breaks them down to grow, obviously those proteins will become easier to break down for us to digest. What also happens is the fat content slightly decreases, which again makes sense because the seed is using its energy to grow. So it's an interesting thing. There are some trade-offs, of course, and there are some differences in studies. Some say the protein level remains about the same, but in all studies, the amino acid content that is accessible, is easily digested, increases. So there's a number of nutritional benefits to sprouting. In addition, sprouting the seed is also known to basically make it much easier to digest. Like just flat out, all the nutrition content is easier for your body to break down. So there's that benefit too. And I also think, though, it's really important to recognize and to remember that just like any fruit or vegetable, the fresher it is, the higher the nutrient content will be. So if you harvest and you eat these sprouts immediately, you'll have the highest vitamin C, vitamin K content in particular. The longer you leave it in the fridge, the less nutrients there will be remaining in the fruit or the vegetable. So in this case, in the sprouts. Same thing with your tomatoes and your apples and things. The vitamin C content in particular will deteriorate rapidly over time. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's why sprouts are so nutritionally dense, because they are basically still alive. So the nutrients haven't really broken down if you harvest them and eat them immediately. So that's something else. That's another thing to think about. So I've shown you how you can grow sprouts with recycled materials at home cheaply, so easily. I mean, less than 5 minutes a day, 5 days, so quick, cheap, easy. I've shown you why you should do it, the taste and the nutrition, and how you can store them for 2 to 3 days. Again, make sure they go straight into the fridge, and make sure you don't leave them for more than about 3 days, because it's a moist material that is a plant material, and over time it will deteriorate. If they seem slimy or smell a bit or they're mushy, you probably don't want to eat them. You want to go to your next batch. But like I said, the best way to eat them is straight after you've grown them and you've rinsed them thoroughly. They taste amazing. They're beautiful. Hopefully that has been a helpful introduction to how to sprout your own seeds easily at home. I hope that you try it for yourself. You taste them, that you are very happy. Stay smiling, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.